Welcome back to the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by DraftKings.com. I'm your host, Jeff Ratcliffe, back for a special edition of the Slant. We've had a few of these mock draft madness shows in the past, and we kind of streamlined things a little bit, just have the A-list celebrity guests with us tonight. But we're going to be going through the staff mock draft 2.0. This evening. We're actually into the second round, almost into the third round at this point, and give you sort of blow by blow each pick as we see them, the action along the way. So I'm not going to really mumble too much here. Already doing too much of that as it is. Let's get right into things. And with me on the show this evening, Mike Clay and Pat Thorman. I'm going to toss it over to Mike first. Mike, we're heading into the third round almost here. We're right at the turn of the end of the second. How do you think things have gone so far? It looks fairly chalk, actually, when I just looked down. The last of the big 23 just went at the 23rd pick. So thoughts so far in this mock up through the first two rounds?
Well, I was just going to make a comment on that, but I see you might be a little ahead of me here. I'm watching Nate on the clock right now at the round 2-3 turn here, and I still see DeMarco Murray out there, but I was hoping he'd get picked. No, he took Sanders, so Murray's still left from what I'm seeing here. But we almost that's what I was going to say. I was going to say our staff must be watching our show too often, because it looked like our big 23 was going to go in the first 23 picks. Looks like it may take till the top 24 or 25. But so far, obviously, I agree with what's happening for the most part. Nate ended up going Sanders Hilton at the turn there. He wanted to get a pair of wide receivers. So still Murray sitting out there. We'll see if somebody snatches him up. I'm picking 11, so I'm not gonna get him. But I think that's, and Jeff, we've talked about that on the show. If you pick early on, you have a chance to get 3 of that big 23. I think it's a big advantage this year, and somebody's going to pull that off, whether it's Joey, Mike, Ross, one of these guys picking here. They're going to grab Murray and end up with the 3 of that big group. So we'll see what happens here. I started off, again, picking 11th. I went with Des Bryant there at 11, and then coming back around on the turn, I got Jeremy Hill. So I'm pretty happy with that in a standard league. Got some youth there and definitely a lot of touchdown scoring upside.
Yeah, Mike, actually, I think that Murray did get picked earlier by Alex Welch.
Interrupt me then.
So that top 23 actually did go according to Chalk.
Yes, they did. All right. Yeah, you should have interrupted me. If I'm saying something stupid, just jump in, cut me off. It's okay. I won't get mad.
Yeah, one of the tricks to the trade here is we're on my fantasy league actually for this mock draft, and sometimes it lags a little and you have to hit that reload this page button, but I thought I did see that as chalk through the first 23 picks. And then really, again, I mean, I've said this numerous times, my least favorite pick this year in the first round is being that number 1 pick overall, because sure, you have your choice of whatever running back you want, but then on the comeback, things get a little bit more dicey. I mean, looking at what Nate did here, went Sanders and Hilton, I mean, I really can't fault him for that. But I would have much rather had one of those top 11 wide receivers at that point instead of, kind of trying to do the best of the rest approach.
Yeah. Go ahead, Pat.
I'm just making my pick here of these tier.
Pat Thorman live on the clock.
2.5 running backs. And
no pressure.
Yeah.
35 seconds.
I'm going to go with the guy with the major volume, and Justin Forsett. I like Buck Allen and everything, but at least for the beginning of the year, Forsett's going to get fed. So it was kind of between him and Morris for me, who I think everyone's a little bit low on Morris personally, but Forsett, yeah, I have him as my 11th running back. So
it's definitely an interesting format, because a lot of times you have these where you start 3 receivers, 2 running backs, a tight end, and then a flex. Most of the time, I've noticed they're PPR. Usually, you're in a PPR format, but in this case, you're standard. So there's actually a chance you might want to consider going running back heavy and throwing a running back in the flex. So we'll see if any teams go that direction and how it sorts out. But I'm with you on Forsett. I think early on in the offseason, I was kind of down on him, but he's worked his way up as we got some clarity in the coaching situation, of course, with Tressman, and the fact that he's clearly atop that depth chart. They didn't really add a super impact running back in the draft, so they're going to obviously rely on him heavily, especially with a lack of depth at wide receiver and some question marks at the tight end position. Buck Allen and Lorenzo Taliaferro. Taliaferro, a guy I think is kind of being undervalued right now, both in the picture there. I think Taliaferro, and a lot of people don't talk about this, but he was stealing goal line work early last season. That's something to worry about with Forsett. And Buck Allen maybe steals a few targets, but otherwise he is in, like you said, in position there for a good 16 to 18 touches every week. That's a lot of value.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and their offensive line performed a lot better last year than the year before, and it looks like Jeff's having some connectivity problems.
This is blowing my mind right now. I hope that my voice is coming through clearly. I was trying to pick Frank Gore like 20 times and somehow wound up with Aaron Rodgers. Not that that's a bad thing, but
well, here I'll fix it for you.
A little contradictory to my message.
This is going in the draft guide, so we got to get the sucker right. So
exactly. But yeah, in this format, a standard scoring format, we really haven't updated folks on that. So if you're listening to this, you can definitely check in. And here, hold on, let me make this pick while I'm gabbing here.
I gave you Rodgers again. Oh, let me handle it. Hold on.
So even with 3 people, we can't keep this thing on the rails. But it really wants to give me Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this thing, you can check out the results in our draft guide update. If you haven't gotten your hands on our draft guide yet, it's a really good product. It's the best product out there. And the cool thing about it is we do these updates, so you get to see this here and see how things change potentially from the previous one if you've already bought the PDF version of the draft guide. Of course, the most updated version will be available for print as well. But in this case, standard scoring league, I really like to anchor my team with 2 solid running back options. Now, I didn't plan on both of them being older running back options. I have Arian Foster now and Frank Gore, but I'll take it. I can shoot for upside later on in this draft. So, happy with how things are going so far here.
Yeah, and it looks like I'm actually on the clock here now, so putting the pressure on me now. Let's see here. I'm looking for a young man named Melvin Gordon. There he is. So I'm sticking with my youth theme here. I got Jeremy Hill and Melvin Gordon at running back, or as Field Yates likes to call him, Gordon, which was a common theme at the ranking summit for some reason. But anyway, so that fills out my top 2 running back slots. And we'll see what Ryan does here. He started with a pair of running backs. I'm thinking if he goes with wide receivers here, I'm not overly impressed with what I'm looking at wide receivers. 4 guys left in my second tier, but none of these guys, the second tier and third tier, are kind of close to me. So if he does go with a pair of receivers, I might pounce on another running back here. And, after what I just talked about, too, will someone start with a trio of running backs? I may actually do it. So let's see here.
Yeah, I'm seeing Alfred Morris fall into the 4th round, even in MFL 10s, which I guess makes more sense since it's PPR. But I don't know. I think that people are kind of sleeping on him a little bit. At least a round too late.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, and he goes with the 3 running backs as well. So Ryan, looks like the guys picking at the turn are going with the same concept here. Ryan he took a receiver there, so he started out C.J. Anderson, Matt Forte, Alfred Morris, Keenan Allen. That's pretty good. Allen I like a little more in PPR, but that's a solid group there. And then now let's see. All right, I'm going to go with another guy I think has a great chance to break out this year, and I'm going to stick with my running back situation there. Carlos Hyde at 4.2. I'm pretty happy with that, especially in standard league again. I worry about him a bit in PPR, but I like him there in the 4th.
I think that's really a good spot for it's really where his value should be. 3rd round was a little too early for my taste, especially with Davis and Yapati being out of the mix. That line's going to suffer. The team's certainly on a downward slope, although, of course, we said that about other teams in the past, and it didn't turn out that, like Dallas last year. But, very fair point. A young player, a lot of potential. 4th round, perfect spot to get him.
Yeah, I mean, especially until the Davis retirement, I was firmly in the everyone's overreacting because it's the off season and there was such high profile retirements and everyone kind of thought the sky was falling, and I thought his value was swinging too far to the negative. The Davis one, it was a pretty big one because I thought Brandon Thomas can fill in for Iapati, but I think, like you said, this is the right area for him beginning of the fourth round.
Yeah, so we have looks like my top. I'm leaning over here. Looks like my top 19 running backs, top 16 receivers, top 2 tight ends, and top. Did Aaron Rodgers end up going then? I can't remember if we.
No, he's still available.
Luck went at 3-3.
The running backs are really starting to dry up, though.
Yes, they are.
There's 2 more I kind of would think about, and 3 more picks. So I'm hoping one of them falls.
Oh boy! All right, I'm going to take a swing here.
Make sure you. Yeah. All right.
Yep.
Very wishful thinking on my part. I decided to go with C.J. Spiller here. I don't really like the options that I have at wide receiver. I wanted T.J. Yeldon, and Sean Siegel took him the pick before me. And this obviously it's not a PPR format, but I do still like the upside that Spiller offers, especially as a third running back with the position really drying up as it is. So Pat, you go Jonathan Stewart right after me. So yeah, the running backs are really flying off the board right now.
Yeah, I can't imagine that there's going to be too many appetizing running backs by the time it makes it back around to the end and to me again. But yeah, I think Stewart in that RB3 tier is one of the better choices. I mean, he's going to get plenty of workload as long as he holds up, which obviously has been his issue. That's digging the beats.
This is somebody's phone. Is somebody calling for a trade? Is that what that is? Another running back. Oh, of course, Ross Miles takes Todd Gurley, gets his St. Louis guy. Joey Bell also goes off the board. So yeah, it's really starting to dry up. That's a theme I've seen. I don't know if you guys have noticed this in the mock drafts that you've been in so far this year, and perhaps MFL 10s as well. There is depth, but then there sort of isn't depth at running back because it really does dry up quickly and it falls off a cliff, and then you're really just throwing darts at at whatever you can get your hands on later in drafts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the same thing in MFL 10s. I've done a whole mess of those, and by the time the end of the 4th, beginning of the 5th round, it rolls around. It's pretty well dried up. But the good thing with that is there's a whole huge wide receiver tier for the next 2 to 3 rounds that you really have no problem finding good options on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the depth at wide receiver this year. You want to get one of those top maybe 11 guys, but if you don't, and I have seen this approach taken, like a team where you're sitting in potentially like a spot where you do that upside down. You go Gronkowski, you go wide receiver or running back heavy after that. Then you could potentially load up on all those upside wide receiver guys in that second and third tier level.
Yeah, and there's always those, we were calling them the cargo shorts receivers. They're a lot of functionality, very little style points. You got the between Roddy White and Bolden, those older guys, Steve Smith. They're available throughout the 8th, 9th round, and they're just as good as guys that are going in the 6th round.
Finally, Aaron Rodgers there at 412 to Nate. Of course, that's a good spot for him. I wouldn't even think about the quarterbacks till round 4. Luck went at 3-3. Of course, we, on our cover, again, it says we prefer Rodgers to Luck, and Luck went before Rodgers again, this time not even close. So. Fingers.
So we're heading into the 5th round now. And yeah, 5th round starts with a wide receiver. I suspect we're going to see a wide receiver run here. Julian Edelman, like him better in a PPR format, but not a bad option still. He's going to see enough volume to put up decent numbers in a standard scoring system as well. So I do expect to see these wide receivers coming off the board. Although right after that, another rookie running back, Amir Abdullah. This guy's actually interesting. Maybe we'll talk about this guy just briefly here because it seems like we've talked about so many of these rookies, but Abdullah is one of the players we actually really haven't covered that much on this show. In an interesting position, obviously going to be kind of taking the reins as the Reggie Bush role in that offense with potential to expand to being maybe even overtaking, surpassing Joyke Bell as the primary weapon in that backfield. So he's a really interesting player, and I'm curious about your guys' thoughts on Abdullah now as we're almost in July.
Yeah, I like him too. I think I'm definitely down in Joyke Bell. I think that at some point Abdullah is probably going to emerge as the number one there this season, probably down the stretch in the second half when the players are starting to wear down a little bit. So I like him. His stock's rising a little bit for me. I think he's in that flex conversation. I'm a little surprised to see him go in the 5th round, but I do see the upside there. And frankly, to see him go in the 5th round, and you see Joe Randall going off the board here, you went Spiller because you were low on depth there. Joyke Bell's gone. It really shows me that going running back heavy early seems like a smart idea for me. I'm happy I did that because there's some serious talent still left on the board at the wide receiver position, and I'm going to have 2 of the next, we'll say, 8 picks here. So, as Pat takes his buddy Allen Robinson, probably would have been one of the guys on my radar, but there's still a lot of intriguing names still left there. So, and there goes Tevin Coleman too in the 5th round. So we're really going running back heavy, and I think that again is a product of having a standard league with 2 running backs and a flex option.
Yeah, and on Abdullah, I'm definitely a fan. Bell's had 3 surgeries in the last 2 off seasons. He didn't average 4 yards a carry. He was really good around the goal line, and it's an offense that's going to be in that position quite often. But you got to imagine that Ebron might take a little bit of those goal line looks, the red zone targets, and obviously Calvin Johnson, with him being full strength. So I'm a little bit lower on Bell. He actually went before Abdullah, but I think, Abdullah's got, the passing down role pretty much locked up, and like you said, Jeff, I think he can take over that full-time role from Bell.
Yeah, really dynamic player, intriguing, and maybe flying a little bit under the radar compared to some of the other rookies in this year's class. So, a name to certainly know there. I prefer him to Coleman. I've been on record there, but Pat, I want to go back to your pick though as well. It's seems to be the super sexy pick right now with Allen Robinson, but there is a counter argument, and the big counter argument you get from a lot of people is his production is really dependent on Blake Bortles. Is there going to be enough touchdown potential to really justify a 5th round pick here? The ceiling's enormous, but we know the floor could be equally as low, right?
Yep. Oh, absolutely. On Bortles, real quick. He was PFF's worst rated passer last year. So there's really nowhere to go but up, I guess you can look at. But they had no running game. Their offensive line was an absolute disaster. He was shell shocked by December. It was tough to watch. I'm surprised they didn't let Henny take that beating for the kid. So he was a guy who was a little bit of a project even after he was drafted. So I do think you're going to see some natural progression from him. And Robinson, from I think it was week 2 to week 10 when he got hurt, he was a wide receiver. It was a low wide receiver 2, and he was getting peppered with targets. So he's with Julius Thomas there, he might get a few less. He might get a few less looks in the red zone. But he only scored 2 touchdowns last year, and he did have a couple nice fantasy weeks. So I do think the upside is there, and the volume should be there.
Yeah, and it's an interesting situation just in general in Jacksonville. Looks like Marquise Lee is going to have to really battle it out with Allen Hurns for that other receiver spot. Beat writers today saying that Rashad Green is the likely slot receiver, so that's pretty intriguing. Not really for fantasy purposes, but football purposes there. But we did know this. We knew that Lee maybe comes in with the better pedigree from the college level, whereas Robinson, massive ceiling and yet unpolished, and some of that polishing certainly seems to have occurred here. So I like the name. I like the name a lot. I like him as a player. And he's going to be, I get a feeling he's going to be on a lot of my teams this year.
Yeah, just kind of changing the subject here drastically. I'm just kind of looking at my team. I went. We have phones ringing, dogs barking. It's we're keeping everybody entertained here.
I'll get my
I
kid
love
to start crying pretty soon.
I went Drew Brees in round 6. There, it was early in round 6. I like to sometimes wait and see if he'll fall. I did not think he would make it back to me. I think he's definitely undervalued. So I'm kind of happy to take him there. But I'm kind of looking at tight end. I saw a lot of options. Wide receiver, a lot of options. Running back, I'm full there with Hill, Gordon, and Carlos Hyde. And then, of course, I had Des Bryant, and I just took Vincent Jackson as well. So I like the way my team's coming together. I thought pouncing on Breeze there in the 6th. Again, a little, probably maybe a round or so earlier than I'd like to go on quarterback. But I feel like when it comes around that 22 or so picks later, I'm still going to have a lot of options.
Ah, jeez. I can get him later. Never mind. Hold on.
Mind of Pat Thorman.
It's a scary place.
And so, yeah, that was the obvious pick there. Pat just goes with Russell Wilson. It was the sort of elephant in the room at this point. Seen him go in the 5th round a lot. I think that's a great value in the 6th round, mid-6th round pick. So, yeah, at this point now, where quarterback stands, the 4 are off the board. I didn't see any others off the board, correct?
No, it was a 4. You're right.
All right, so Aaron Rodgers, Andrew Luck, not in that order. Then Drew Brees, Russell Wilson. At this point, if you don't grab one of these players, I don't really see a huge rush to get a quarterback, especially with the way some of these players have been falling later in drafts. So, that's why it's been typically my strategy to just kind of not even really worry about it. Like if I looked up and I saw Wilson sitting there in the 7th, then sure, I'm going to grab him. Or if I saw Aaron Rodgers in the 5th, then I'm going to grab him. But otherwise, I really haven't been prioritizing the position at all. Sort of mid to late round quarterback approach that has been pretty successful so far in mocks for me.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. I mean, that's kind of what I wrote about in the draft guide. That unless one of those top guys kind of slides a little bit, which Wilson in the 6th round qualifies, I think. You can wait to the 9th, 10th round, and you're still picking off, Romo, Manning, Eli Manning, Tannehill sometimes slides. It's basically just wait and see which one slides because there's not a heck of a lot of difference in that QB 5 through 10, 11 range.
Yeah, there is parity spots in the among the rankings this year at various positions. Like Mike and I have talked about on the show, there's a parity spot once you get sort of 7 tight ends in to about 30 some tight ends in. There's a lot of parity there. There's a parity spot in the quarterbacks like you just mentioned. So it's really key to be able to identify those places because you're not wasting picks then if you're the quarterback 10 is essentially the same as quarterback 6 to you. Don't take 6. Wait and take the 10th quarterback and get value elsewhere.
Yeah, so, today we the ESPN mock today. I took Tom Brady, I think in the 9th, and then came back with Rivers right before I took my defensive kicker. I mean, if you could pull that off, that's an outstanding unit right there.
Was that a 10 or a 12 team?
That was a 12-teamer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty darn good value there. Normally, later on, I'm looking at players like Sam Bradford and Teddy Bridgewater if I can get my hands on him. He usually goes a little bit before I take a backup, if I take a backup, but you can't beat Rivers at that point.
Yeah, and if you take Brady, obviously you need to take someone else because most likely he's going to miss a couple of games. And Bradford is actually a nice fit because they have I think they start with 2 or 3 pretty sweet matchups, which we can kind of project at this point. So he can slide in for Brady until Brady's up and running.
All right, so now we're into the 7th round. Exciting times, I know. And you see LeGarrette Blount and Rashad Jennings go at the turn. Jarvis Landry, Mike Wallace. So just to, giving you a sense of where we are. Tight end, actually, a little bit of a mini tight end run at the end of the 6th there as well. Jordan Cameron, surprisingly, Kyle Soppe took him at 6'8", and then at 6'10", Greg Olsen goes off the board. Tight ends is another one of those positions for me this year I've just been really waiting on, and patience has been rewarded in a number of situations just based on who has been dropping. Mike and I talked about this on the show the other day. So there is value to be had there as well. It seems the wise approach is to load up on running backs and wide receivers. That's at least what I've been doing for the most part in a lot of my mocks. I don't know if you guys have found success elsewhere or similar approach.
It's kind of the same thing with Russell Wilson. If he slides to the 6th, I'll take him. If not, I'll wait. If Kelsey slides to the 5th, I'll take him. He went late 4th in this draft, but I'll grab him in the 5th pretty much every time. And if not, I'll wait and take a Delanie Walker or Jason Witten, a handful of rounds later.
Yeah, I have. There's just too many values to be had at that position. I mean, as tempting as Gronkowski is late in the first round, I think with Brady suspended, for me, he's more of a borderline first rounder. So usually you're not going to get him at that point. He's going to go in the mid to late portion of the first. So I'm just waiting. I mean, sometimes I'll pounce on Kelsey if he starts to fall a little bit. I've done that and had some success. Otherwise, I mean, you're looking at Martellus Bennett. I've seen him fall into the hundreds. Jason Witten is a steal every single draft. Antonio Gates is now going right around Witten. Julius Thomas lasted really late in the draft from today. And like you mentioned, Delanie Walker, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, a good flyer. Vernon Davis, I think, is a good one. And Zach Ertz, I think this is his year as well. So there's a lot of options at that position. Definitely no reason to rush there if you're going to pass on Gronkowski.
And looking to the draft now here, Peyton Manning did finally go off the board in the mid-7th. I like Eric Decker there, Pat. Pat gets him smack dab in the middle of the 7th rounds, and Decker's one of those players. His ADP it's just out of control. It's far too low. If you actually look at what he did last year, I mean, yeah, it wasn't eye-popping numbers, but he put up 900-plus yards with really nothing, and he did it while he was hurt. So this year, I don't know. There are some in football circles who think Geno Smith is going to take a step forward this year. I don't know if I'd go that far, but I think the Jets take a step forward, and that can only bode positively for Decker's value.
Yeah, I mean, and if Geno doesn't take a step forward, we know where we have in Fitzpatrick. I mean, he's not going to win you a league as your quarterback, but he can at least facilitate, his receivers doing well. He's shown that in the past, and so Geno basically has a Fitzpatrick floor. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it. Maybe he exceeds it, and then we win even more. Decker, I was wondering if I could wait a little bit on Decker because he has been sliding, but in this room, I figured I needed to grab him where I did.
Yeah, I'm gonna have an interesting decision here. Maybe Ryan will make it easy for me. I took Roddy White there, so I'm a little old at wide receiver behind Dez. I have Vincent Jackson and Roddy White. I like both of them a lot more than most. I think they're both wide receiver 2 options. I think Roddy's more of a borderline. Vincent Jackson probably a bit of a safer one. Ryan takes Michael Floyd here, so he goes before John Brown and Fitzgerald. They're both sitting out there. So Floyd, first of the Arizona wide receivers, no surprise there. He's he's going to be out in the field every down. He's a good blocker and led that unit last year. So we'll see what Ryan does here. But either way, I'm gonna jump on my 4th running back here. The only starting lineup position I have not taken is tight end, and there's lots of options there as we just discussed. So I'm in no rush at that position.
And we should note that Ryan McKee is drafting in Australia. It is about 10:40 in the morning there, so he already knows what happened in this mock draft. Future.
He's doing an upside down draft.
It's Tuesday at 10:40.
he went with Zach Ertz there, so it's hard to be upset with that one in the 8th round. There's probably a little early, but there's nothing wrong with that. He has great breakout potential. So, all right, I was staring at Duke Johnson, Bishop Sankey. I actually have Sankey ranked a little higher, but that's normally if I'm looking at a flex there, a guy I think I may have to use, I may lean towards Sankey. I think he's safer to get those touches early in the year, and I think he is underrated. But I think Duke Johnson has that high ceiling that he could come out, win that job in the preseason. I think that Crowell is probably going to be busy on early downs, but I think Duke Johnson has a better chance than Sankey, or a higher ceiling is probably the better way to put it, especially in an offense that's extremely run heavy. So I'm throwing the dart at Johnson there, which I almost hate to do because I feel like everyone just loves to hate on Sankey. I think he's much better than advertised, but we'll see.
I like the Duke Johnson pick. I mean, he's a guy who, I mean, he was kind of neck and neck with Abdullah on the before the draft. I thought Abdullah could run inside a little bit better than Duke, but Duke's super explosive, and Cleveland has has no explosive options. So I mean, if they're going to score points, they're going to have to get him involved.
And I had a short board of consisting of Duke Johnson and Bishop Sankey, so Mike made my decision a lot easier. I like Johnson there too. I was really hoping that he would slide to me. The simple fact is, we've talked about this with other, especially the wide receiver position, Mike. He's the most talented guy on the team, right? And eventually that cream should rise to the top. And let's just look at the what this guy did in college at the U. Very, very impressive resume coming into the league, and I really like his ceiling if he gets that opportunity. Though, again, we're in a situation where the team may hold him back a little bit. A lot of questions entering 2015, especially on the offensive side of the ball.
I'm going to go back a little bit here. Here's a guy that's been going a lot earlier than I kind of expected, but we haven't talked about him, Jeff, much this offseason. I have him 44th at the wide receiver position, and it's Mike Wallace. He's been going, I've seen him go as a borderline wide receiver, too. He went in the 7th here. That's not too bad. But what do you guys think about him? I just think, with keeping Charles Johnson involved there, it's so cold. They're going to try and lean on Peterson in that Norv offense, and of course they have Charles Johnson. Although I'm not a big fan there, I just don't really like, I guess, the wide receivers on that squad, and of course Kyle Rudolph too will be back. So, I guess we'll start with you, Pat. But what do you guys think of those Mike Wallace this year?
Well, I think he's going to be a guy that's tough to start as one of your top 3 receivers in a seasonal league. I like him in best ball because he's going to have some big plays. Teddy throws a pretty nice deep ball. I mean, he doesn't have a cannon. He doesn't have a cannon for an arm, but he does throw a pretty accurate deep ball. So I mean, I think he's going to have some big plays. But I don't know if the consistency is going to be there. Like you say, I mean, it's an offense that's going to revolve around Peterson. The defense is improving. Like you said, it's a cold weather team. I don't know how open that offense is going to be, which is a concern for him. And like you mentioned, Charles Johnson.
Okay, I just want to pause here for a second. Was that a reaction to a pick?
I don't know what that was.
Or did you just, because sometimes we'll see picks. I don't know, Darren McFadden in the 2nd round, for example, that caused us to hiccup.
To be clear, that was not in this draft. That was not this draft. You can rely on our mocks. Our mocks, we have some good people here.
Yeah, that was actually in the Experts FSTA. You've heard that on this show. We talked about it. You heard it probably. I think Matthew Berry talked about it on his podcast. It's widely talked about in the industry. It was all over Twitter, and that wasn't even the worst one that Mike and I have seen so far this offseason. We saw Andre Williams in the 3rd round about a month and a half ago, and that probably takes the gold medal at this point.
Well, but, yeah, at least until we saw someone's big board that had Delaney Walker 40th and Fozzie Whitaker ranked ahead of Joique Bell. So we've seen some weird stuff this offseason, Jeff. You can tell some people are still in baseball mode, I want to say.
Yeah, maybe they're trying to win $1 million playing fantasy golf on DraftKings. That's a segue. Look at that. Hey, real quick about DraftKings. You know the deal. You've listened to this show. You've heard it a bunch of times. You can head over there and get in on this daily craze if you haven't already. Tons of money obviously being paid out. If you're an MLB player, then it's the best. It beats season-long leagues. You start 2 pitchers, 8 positional players. You get in on the money right away. You could be like our buddy, and he is our buddy now, Pete Jennings. Won $1 million last year playing, just enormous potential in playing daily fantasy. And hey, there's going to be another millionaire maker for PGA Tour golf, the British Open coming up here next in 2 weeks. Is that what it is? Either way, get in on the action. Use promo code PFF to get a free entry today over at DraftKings.com. Yes, that is DraftKings.com. Let's get back to the action. Oh, cool. I was hoping that wouldn't be while I was on the clock. But anyway, yeah. Back to the Mike Wallace really quickly. for me, he's a player that I don't think he's going to be on any of my teams. If I'm going with a veteran player, typically it's going to be the approach that I took in this draft. I mean, early on, obviously, I took Calvin Johnson in the second round. That's not really a big deal. That's not like, ooh. But I did take Andre Johnson a little bit later on. I can't remember which round I got him in. But, either way, I grab Andre Johnson, older player, obviously, almost as old as I am. And then later on in drafts, I like to shoot more for younger upside players, if at all possible. And so that's the approach that I really took there. And of course, now I'm talking and I am on the clock, so I'm going to try and make a quick pick here. But I wouldn't be owning Mike Wallace on really any of my teams this year, just based on where he's going. We kind of know what he is. The book has been written on him, and I don't think he offers that upside profile that I would want out of a receiver at that point in drafts.
Yeah, another guy just went there that I think is way well. I mean, it's, especially since it's not PPR. Sean, Sean knows his stuff. Ninth round there, Kendall Wright. I just struggle to get excited about him, especially. And this is a guy I liked earlier in his career just because I felt like at some point they would use him closer to the goal line or more downfield, and they just have not done that. He did score 6 touchdowns last year, but that matched his career total from the previous 2 years, and it was a fluke. He just took in some longer touchdowns that just can't sustain. He's just not getting those targets in the end zone or near the goal line. So a guy I've definitely soured on considerably. Very small, not a good offense, and I'm kind of surprised actually to see Sean go with him in round 9. It's too bad he's not on to give us some feedback on there. Maybe I'll give him a hard time in the chat.
Yeah, if I'm going to take any piece of that receiver core, it's going to probably be Green Beckham, but I'm not doing that until much in mocks. I mean, we're in the 9th round, so we're not going to get too much later on. But, another player who fits that profile that I'm looking for, really high ceiling, yes, low floor, but you're going to get that at this point in the draft. If he did have a massive floor, he wouldn't be going this late, in all of these mocks. So, yeah, for me, I couldn't agree with you more. It just seems like it's such a low ceiling out of Kendall Wright to really like him in this format.
Yeah, I mean, that offense is still such a huge question mark. I mean, we read about they're going to have a little more shotgun to keep Mariota comfortable, but I'm not exactly sure. They drafted a fullback before they drafted Cobb, so if they're going to go with power, how much is Sankey going to be involved? Honestly, the main guy, hopefully he lasts another couple picks for me, but is Delanie Walker is the guy that I'm comfortable taking in that offense at his ADP.
Well, I'm taking a tight end here, so maybe I'm going to.
I'm Julius Thomas, don't you?
No, don't worry. I'm not taking Walker. Don't worry. Although I know he's 4th in receiving yards last year. He's a great blocker. He's going to be on the field. I don't know. I don't see the ceiling with Walker. I'm fine. I get it. If you wait a long time, there's nothing left, and you're loading up elsewhere. But at this point, I think there's a couple better values there. I think I would go Thomas. I think Donnell's very close to him. I'm fine going either way, but there's one guy still out there, and I don't think Ryan will take him. He took Zach Ertz last round, so I think I'm going to go with Mr. Antonio Gates here. We know this guy has top 3, top 5 upside. Actually, he was number 2 last year. And although we do expect touchdown regression, it makes sense he'll drop a little bit. Keep in mind, he was easily number 1 in the NFL in end zone targets to tight ends. He was way ahead of even Rob Gronkowski. And he was the only one. He was actually in the top 5. Actually, give me some more room for error. He was definitely in the top 10 in the entire NFL in end zone targets. So, he definitely gets work down there, and his touchdown number, albeit a little inflated, you can understand how he scored that often because he was used so often near the goal line. And I just got him in round 10, so I'm not going to complain about that at all.
Yeah, it seems like with Walker, there's this trope that we get every year. Rookie quarterback leans on tight end. Like you hear it all the time. I don't know if that's necessarily what what we should expect out of this Titans offense and out of Mariota in that offense. So I can understand maybe a later tight end by committee type approach with Walker, but I would much rather have somebody like Gates. I took Witten the previous rounds. So I would much rather those two over Walker for sure.
Yeah, but another thing that I like about Walker is he had one of the lowest catchable target rates of any tight end last year. Their three quarterbacks were the most inaccurate quarterbacks in the league. All their receivers had pretty low catchable target rates as well. And one thing we do know about Mariota is he's pretty accurate, and especially in short areas. So I think Walker will benefit from that.
It's interesting, going back to Sean. Sean actually did comment on his pick there with Kendall Wright, and he said he thinks he was overrated as a talent coming out of college, but now underrated. And he actually, he's somebody who has been very much invested in Marcus Mariota, and he said Marcus Mariota should provide a big boost. Now, Sean has also been quoted as saying that Mariota is one of the best fantasy quarterback prospects to come into the league in several years. So obviously he's pushing his chips all in on Mariota there.
Yeah, and I agree in the sense that he has a high floor. I mean, I have Mariota projected for right around 100 carries this year. I don't think that's a stretch if he plays 15 games, and he shouldn't have a problem with that barring severe injury. So, I think very much like what Russell Wilson did when he came into the league, I think, Mariota has a chance to put up a similar line as a rookie. But, man, if he plays that well, the Titans can get that franchise turned around pretty quickly. And it is a division where there's an opportunity to jump in there and make the playoffs. I think the Colts are, or at least, make a push for it. I know the Colts are the heavy favorite there, but with Tennessee and Jacksonville, it's wide open for that number 2 spot. And their schedule should be on the easy side because they struggled last year, so they'll have a shot to, get in the mix there, very much like Houston did last year. And there you go, Pat.
I couldn't let you guys shame me out of taking him with my next pick.
I honestly think that's fine where you got him, because going right after him, Pat does take Delaney Walker at 10-7. Going right after him is Tyler Eifert, and I'd much rather have Walker there, so obviously he proved to be good value for you.
Victor Cruz, he was in one of my recent articles about guys that I'm just not going to draft this year. Like I said, I'd love to see him get back to what he was. He's a fun player to watch. I wish him the best. But, I mean, with the patella tendon tear, there's just so much unknown. If he starts on PUP, you got to hold him for 6 weeks. For a 10th round pick with some of the other receivers that are still on the board, I'm just not willing to make that kind of investment in a guy with that much question.
Philip Dorsett there, that's a one that's a little early, goes right after Cruz. I like him as a flyer at the very end. I think that's a little early, but hey, Andre Johnson gets hurt or something. I do think Dorsett's definitely had him on creep, so it makes him intriguing if you're investing in top-notch offenses. I think I might have missed another one. Charles Sims, did he go? Yeah, it looks like he did.
Yeah.
It looks like somebody from my tier 4 is still sitting there, but I guess not.
So we are now on the 10-11 turn, and just, I didn't even say this earlier, it's a 16-round mock draft, and we do have a kicker and defense that we are required to take, correct?
Yes.
We're required to take them. Hey, if you're not required to take them, though, don't take them, right? Load up on your positional players, and you're always going to drop somebody. So load up on draft day, and just make sure you can drop ahead before week 1. And I love that strategy. But yeah, here, so we're heading down the home stretch here. Really, hopefully nobody takes a kicker before round 16. But I don't know when the defense. It seems like right around this point, you're going to start to see that first team defense on the board, which is typically, and that was not a car crash or anything like that. That was just Pat sneezing.
Everybody's okay.
Everybody's all right.
Yeah, where's that mute button?
So yeah, I mean, hey, everybody loves having that number 1 defense, because then you can set it and forget it. But don't try and draft that number 1 defense. How often does the top defense? How often are they the top team that's selected in your draft? I mean, look last year. How many leagues do you think the Eagles were drafted in, and they finished as the number 2 team defense? Streaming's a much better approach, and there are a few teams that you can really start out with. and get your stream on without having to really worry too much. As in, look at the slate of games early on in the season if you're going to take that approach. But anyway, back to it. The quarterback well is really starting to dry up here. So I'm doing my best J.J. Zacharyson impression, and still have not taken a quarterback into the 11th round. Matt Stafford and Matt Ryan just go off the board. So there's maybe one or two players left that have some potential to be QB1s here. So I'm holding out some hope. 4 more picks, 3 more picks until I'm up. So.
Yeah, and we started late at some point. Let's see, I still have a little bit till I go. We'll give a little bit of a teaser how this thing started. Le'Veon Bell, Adrian Peterson. Actually, there goes really quick. There goes Tom Brady in the 11th round. That's a great value there. I like that a lot.
Yep.
I
so
think
I'm done. that's it.
Yeah.
That's all, folks.
Yeah. And he went after Matt Stafford, who just was not good last year, is not a very good quarterback, has taken significant advantage of Calvin Johnson throughout his career. So, I think Brady in the 11th round, that's an outstanding get there by Kyle. That would have been my target had I not felt that Breeze was a good value in round 6. So I think Kyle gets the award for best quarterback value. But anyway, bouncing back here. Bell, Peterson, Charles. 3 running backs to start. No surprise in standard. In fact, I'm surprised there were not more running backs. And Jeff, you kind of commented on that early on there. Julio Jones went to Ross at 4th. That was the first wide receiver. Demaryius Thomas, Eddie Lacy, Marshawn Lynch, Arian Foster went to Jeff. Sean took Antonio Brown. Great value there late in round 1, even though it is, again, a standard. Rob Gronkowski went 10th. Des Bryant, C.J. Anderson. And then rounding out the top 15, Matt Forte, Jeremy Hill, and DeMarco Murray, who somehow I missed that the first time around. So that really shows you the depth across the board, that top 23 we talked about. You look at round 2, Calvin Johnson, 2.5. Odell Beckham lasted to round 2 there to Sean. So Sean goes Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham. That's a fun unit there. Scott got A.J. Green, Jordy Nelson, LaShawn McCoy. You see Randall Cobb goes at 210. And Mike Evans, of course, rounds out the top 23. I mean, a lot of times I've been in mocks and someone says, how did you get Calvin in round 2? Or how did you get this guy at the end of round 2? That kind of thing. It's because that big 23 this year is just loaded with talent. Good players are going to fall. So if you get to pick your draft slot, a lot of people this year, the popular group think out there is go late. You want late, make someone else pick the running backs early. You get a value late, but then you're going to be kicking yourself come the beginning of round 3 or late round 2 when somebody's getting Calvin Johnson or Randall Cobb, Mike Evans, something like that. So if it's me, I want that early draft slot this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Right in that range is perfect this year. And going back to what's been going on in the draft as we're talking, some wide receivers coming off the board. At this point, you're swinging for the fences. Cody Latimer, Ruben Randall. I mean, Randall's actually intriguing. Maybe we should talk about him briefly here. Obviously, there's with Cruz likely back in the mix, there's another mouth to feed. We also have Vereen potentially there, a weapon that really the Giants lacked last year. So another player who's going to get some targets. Randall, though, I don't expect to see any kind of repeat of his target volume from last year, but getting some praise, in the offseason. He's the best wide receiver there, although Cruz and Beckham aren't practicing. But an interesting player who does have some serious upside. He flashed that upside at the very end of the season last year. So he's a guy, in the end of the 11th round, that's not a terrible dart to throw by any means.
Yeah, like you said, he did that at the end of last year, and that's when Beckham was going full nuclear. So he showed ability to coexist when Beckham was taking all the air out of the offense or not. I wonder how much he might take away from Donnell, who showed a pretty good drop-off toward the end of the year last year as Randall kind of surged. So there are just a lot of mouths in that offense, and I think one of the best ways to play that is to take Eli Manning.
And that's exactly what I did. I did that as the sort of best of the rest approach. Really interesting, I waited at quarterback, and it looks like Ryan McKee took a very similar approach here because at the 11-12 turn, he took his first two quarterbacks and he went with Phillip Rivers and Teddy Bridgewater. That's a nice little tandem. Wouldn't you agree, Mike?
Yeah. I like. Hold on. I'm picking here.
I was
I'm
doing that
distracted.
to throw you off. The mind games here in our mock drafts. We take everything serious. We're very competitive here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm doing 40 things at once here. So let's see here. I'm just taking flyers. I'm gonna go Jerick McKinnon here as a 12th round flyer. Just took Dorial Green Beckham, so I'm going with them young upside guys on the bench.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that approach later on in drafts, and but back to that question there. So Rivers, Bridgewater. I mean, this shows you what you could potentially do if you take that late round quarterback approach. It's pretty interesting to me. It's really intriguing. I wish I wasn't on the turn, but I do like that maybe a little bit better than what I'm going to do here, which I'm going to just load up on NFC East. And I'll be a little bit of a homer. Honestly, left on the board right now, I just picked a 12-5. I picked Sam Bradford. Left on the board, Colin Kaepernick, okay, the rookies. And those are really the only other people, or the other players that I'd be looking at other than Bradford. And, certainly you can make a debate, or you make an argument for Kaepernick over Bradford, and I hear that all day long. But for me, the ceiling that Bradford offers is potentially very, very high. We saw Sanchez last year was the number 10 scoring quarterback when he was the starter. I mean, that's Mark Sanchez. So what can you possibly expect out of Bradford here? Potentially big things if he's healthy. And at this point in the draft, I'm willing to take a chance on that one.
Yeah, of course I just closed out of the draft room, so.
Yeah, no, I agree that Bradford is an awesome pick at this stage of the game. Like we were talking about earlier, he's got an excellent September as far as the schedule goes. Yeah, no, I mean, that offense is, if they're going to run a lot of plays, we talk about it all the time. They might go a little more run heavy this year. Obviously, they have the horses in the backfield. But he's like, Bradford, probably the best quarterback that Chip's had at his disposal as a pro coach. So I'm fairly excited for him.
And, yeah, to touch back on Teddy Bridgewater, I mean, the only thing that really worries me about him is that the cold. I mean, they're playing outside. It's going to be freezing out there. They're going to try and revolve that game, that offense around Adrian Peterson. I think he will, be top 10 in rushing yards at the position. I think that helps, raise his floor a little bit. I also think he has a lot of talent. I think, just the fact that he's a potential breakout player, could turn into a superstar this year, that's enough to take a flyer on him. I think round 12, probably want him maybe a round or two later. That's mostly, primarily where he's been going. But with Ryan's strategy there to go with Rivers, a safe guy that's going to get you borderline quarterback one production, and then come back with Bridgewater, who could be a breakout player, I think that's a pretty nice strategy there as well. And I also wanted to mention Pat, Danny Woodhead, nice target there. I think it's easy to forget. Jeff, I pointed this out to you as I was working on capsules out at the conference. I think it was 76 catches he had 2 years ago. Yep. In standard, he was a running back too. I mean, it's easy to forget that because he missed so much time last year, but his role should be similar out there in San Diego this year as the passing down back. A kind of a downer for Melvin Gordon in PPR leagues, but even in standard, Woodhead in round 12, I think that's a nice target.
Yeah, I mean, and he's shown the ability to burrow for 4 or 5 yards, even taking handoffs too in the right situations. So I mean, if they're in a hurry up and they're down in the red zone, they're not going to switch him out to put Gordon in, and he can score in the red zone as well on the ground.
So guys, what do you? We're just about winding down now. You're just kind of filling out your benches. What do you think? Any regrets or like your strategy? What do you think? Pat?
Yeah, I wound up with Lacey first again, which was the same as last time, and I wound up with my same Delanie Walker, Josh Hill combo at tight end, which was familiar. Just kind of with Hill. he's kind of, the buzz is wearing off a little bit with him, but I do still think that there is a chance at having some nice upside with his role, and pairing him with Walker, who's a safe bet. I still like that combination, which is the same I used the last time. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'm looking at your squad right now. I like it. I think you got a nice there value with Wilson. I have him very close to Breeze, and you took him right after I took Breeze, so obviously I like that. Ivory scares me a little bit. I don't know. I like him the most of that group in New York, but I struggled to see him out there, and when they're spread on passing downs, so that worries me a little bit. But I just don't think I'm going to have him very much this year. As much as I like him as a talent, I think there's a chance he loses that role. But you do have Lacey Stewart Forsett, so that's good to get you have an option at running back in the flex there. Wide receiver, maybe a little top heavy there with Jordy Nelson. I think Decker, Robinson, Smith could settle in as wide receiver threes, but you got values there with those guys. Robinson maybe a little early. Smith obviously is a great value this year, late in rounds. And Walker Hill, you're kind of you either have we're talking, I guess, a back end tight end one, or you have a serious breakout guy at tight end. So I like the structure there.
Cool.
Not that you needed my support or anything.
It's always nice. It's always nice to have confirmation.
Well, that's never good. The teams you like the most are always the worst ones, and vice versa.
Yeah, tell that to my MFL 10s the last year. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, looking at my squad, I do like how I ended up with the positional guys. It's just really tough when you have to rely on Eli and Sam Bradford as your quarterbacks. But I feel that's the give and take that you have to ultimately make. If you're drafting with a bunch of slappies, then you can pretty much get away with whatever you want. But in this room with these folks, these other 11 people, it's tough to really get that completely balanced team that you really strive for. But that would be my only regret. Maybe I should have pulled the trigger on the quarterback a little bit earlier. Was hoping that Tom Brady would have fell to me there, and it just didn't happen. It was a few picks away, which is usually when you're hoping for something to happen, that's pretty much what always takes place in drafts.
Yeah, and I'll try and be critical of your team. We agree too much. All right, Vernon Davis there. Well, maybe I can. That's a good pick. I had him on my radar there for my number 2 tight end, so that's good. But yeah, I mean, obviously a little bit light at quarterback, but you have breakout potential with Bradford. You have Eli Manning as well, who could provide back-end quarterback one numbers. I think he's a little overvalued right now because, he's been doing this his whole career. One year he's good, next year he takes a step back. So, I think he's probably safest considered as a strong quarterback too. And then Foster, Gore, Spiller, Sankey. I thought Spiller went a little bit early, but, he was in that tier, so no big deal there. You have some options. But definitely you always talk about going with the young guys, but your team's a little old here. You got Foster, Gore, and then at wide receiver, you're relying on Calvin, Andre Johnson, and of course you have Vernon Davis and Jason Witten. So I know you like Kevin White. You have Kenny Stills in there. It's a good pick. I like Martavis Bryant too. Bishop Sankey's a good flyer there. So usually you and I are on the same page, and I do like specific players, but I think I don't know. It doesn't seem like some of these guys don't seem like a Jeff Ratcliffe squad. I'm surprised you can go a little younger.
Yeah, I guess it all comes down to where you're positioned, and for me, where I was positioned, running back kind of set the tone, being at 1-8, taking Foster there. I would have loved to had potentially an earlier pick, maybe get my hands on Lacey. I don't know. For me, it sort of set the tone, and I went with it. The nice thing though is there is balance on this squad. So I'm not just completely overloaded with older guys. So hopefully this is, that strategy might pan out. I don't know about this one. But the good thing is this is a mock, so it's not, not the team I'll be rolling into battle with.
It's a mock because I just took Dwayne Allen in round 13. my do not draft Dwayne Allen. But, man, round 13, I mean, you look at what's on the board there. I mean, I can't believe he made it that far. As much as I think he's horribly overdrafted. Round 13, I'm okay with. I mean, the fact is, I mean, what are the arguments against him? Or one of them, at least, is, and this is the only one I can get behind, is that he hasn't really been deployed yet because he's been so beat up. if that's the case, I mean, this guy has a sky high ceiling. He could be a top 5 perennial tight end if they really just put him to use and say, okay, he's ready to go, he's healthy. And that's my case for him. I think in round 13, if you can get a tight end like that, I think that's the way to go. I'm looking my other options: Heath Miller, Owen Daniels, Charles Clay, Jason Morrow, Kobe Fleener, Jordan Reed, Jared Cook, Jacob Tammany. These guys just don't have that same ceiling that Dwayne Allen has. So, if you can get him this late as a flyer, I'm okay with that.
I'm going to be really interested to see how often they roll with two tight ends versus 3 receivers, especially with their offensive line being so kind of, I did pretty poor actually. And so you have a good pass blocking running back in Gore, and you have one of the better blocking tight ends in Allen. If they're going to run 3 wide sets and then just have leave Luck back there with some extra blockers, or if they're going to run 12 personnel like last year, I think that's going to come into play quite a bit. I'm interested to see what the percentages are on that.
At least I didn't take Matt Jones. He just went off the board. Let's see. I'm gonna take a stab at Mariota here. I thought about Kaepernick, Cutler, Griffin, Homer still on the board there. And they gave me Monte Ball. Whoa.
The computer wants you to have Monte Ball.
Yes, that was weird. Okay, it really does.
So yeah, Matt Jones, we're going at the very beginning of the 14th. We've talked about him ad nauseum on this show, just really not buying it as really a fantasy relevant storyline. Hey, that's kind of where we're at with Matt Jones. But there's a hype train behind him for sure. Just not going to be on any of my teams this year. At least I don't even think he's going to be on any dynasty teams, to be honest with you. I do have one more rookie draft coming up. The downtime July rookie draft, which is always great, but I'm not going to be targeting Matt Jones in that thing.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's sorry, Pat, but I think that helps you out, though. No, you didn't take Morris. Someone else did. But anyway, I think that helps Morris's stock a little bit this year. I don't think he has really any threat to playing time. I think Jones, they're going to force out in the field on passing downs. No big deal. That's what Morris has been. Morris has been in that role for years, so not a big issue there. And his targets were up a little bit last year, which is good news for his prospects, regardless across the board, in PPR leagues and that. So, Jones, we'll see. I mean, we'll see the power of the college football focused database. I mean, they're just not a fan of his running, of his receiving, of his blocking, nothing. Jones just terrible at Florida last year. But, hey, maybe part of that was that offense. We'll see how he does this year.
Yeah, I was going to say the only thing you really have going for him is his draft position, or where he got picked, their investment in him. So other than that, like you said, there's really, he seems to be a zero in every other category. But I mean, you do have to weigh the fact that they did spend a high leverage pick on him.
Yeah, and how about we have a couple defenses going here. The looks like Seattle went, and now the Jets went. I do like the Jets as a defense. I mean, I'm not going to reach on them, but they're a good early season defense. Great week 1 matchup there, and then Aaron Dobson, Doug Baldwin, so I'm surprised to see Dobson go there. Ross takes him in round 14. He's been pretty much undrafted, but hey, if you're going to take a flyer and a wide receiver, why not go to a really good offense and like the one in New England?
Should be noted, I did take Tyler Lockett before Doug Baldwin went off the board. And, again, it's that matter of floor-ceiling combination. Baldwin, certainly a higher floor than Lockett. We don't know what to expect out of him yet. We just know he's a darn good football player, and he's on a team, yes, it's going to be run heavy, but he could really end up leading the team in receiving yards. I would not be surprised at all if he does that this year, ceiling much higher than Doug Baldwin. So took a stab on him in the 14th round there. But, yeah, defense is now coming off the board. I mean, this is where things start to wind down, but I do agree the Jets are an intriguing team. Obviously, they're stacked at cornerback. They have Todd Bowles, though. I think this is really the straw that stirs the drink. Todd Bowles, his defenses in Arizona, they had really one of the best secondaries. They obviously had some talent up front with Calais Campbell. They had a really suspect linebacker core, though, especially last year, arguably maybe the weakest starting inside linebackers in the league with Larry Foote and then whoever they were throwing out with him, Kevin Minter at times. and yet still just an awesome fantasy defense. I expect to see the same thing out of the Jets this year. So that'd be one I would target, but I'm not going to target them in anything other than the second to last round. Guys, come down the home stretch, so why don't we throw out some final thoughts there? I guess I was cutting you off, Pat.
Yeah, I just really quick wanted to ask you about that. I saw one of the tweets from PFF Maine saying how the Cardinals had the highest percentage of dime defense. And how do you think that's, and I know they blitzed a lot to kind of create that pass rush. How do you think that's going to affect, at least from an IDP perspective, like what the linebackers, how often they'll be on the field, and who those extra defensive backs will be?
Yeah, I don't think it's a simple thing where we can just say thus the Jets are going to have high percentage dime defense. Really, the Cardinals didn't have a second linebacker who could play all three downs on the inside, so they were using Deion Buchanan in that role. The Jets do. The Jets have 2 3-down linebackers, David Harris and Demario Davis. So I don't think we're going to see the same exact scheme just play over to that personnel there. Although I think the scheme does bode positively for Calvin Pryor, who disappointed some last year. I'd be, really looking at him as an upside defensive back who'd be, priority in IDP leagues. But I don't think it's going to just be a simple, let's cut and paste this defensive scheme that we used last year, this year in New York.
Yeah, and I'll hop in here. My final thoughts here quickly. 2 things. First of all, I wanted to talk about Lockett for a second. I was a little higher on him about a week ago than I am now, just because it seems like Seattle has decided he is Doug Baldwin's backup. So he either needs to go in and beat him out, which seems unlikely, at least out of the gate, or he needs to overtake him at some point during the offseason, or just be so good that they have to put him out there with a guy, opposite Baldwin, two guys on the smaller side. So it's a little bit of a concern. It may take him some time to get on the field. I was hoping he'd play opposite Baldwin, but it looks like they want to keep Kearse out there to block, and they do run a lot, so it makes perfect sense. And Chris Matthews, of course, is emerging there as a guy that can play in 3-wide sets. So it might take a while, especially in a run-heavy Seattle offense. But, of course, late in the draft, you're taking flyers on talent, and we know he has a ton of ability. And just a final thought, Jeff, maybe I'm stealing your thunder here. Actually, I'm on the clock here, so let me take my defense. Done. Round 15. This is our second mock draft. Of course, Jeff mentioned we update our draft guide every month. The PDF is set to come out tomorrow. So if you have already purchased the draft guide via PDF, or if you're a Gold subscriber, you get it automatically. Just sign into your account tomorrow. At some point, we'll be tweeting about it and posting. That update will be on the site, and this draft guide as well as this mock draft as well as a recap from Tyler Lochner will be included in the draft guide. Updated rankings, articles, everything that you need to know, and of course the print version also available at Amazon or CreateSpace. The #1 selling fantasy sports book right now on Amazon. So make sure you hop on, get a nice, pretty print version for your coffee table.
Yeah, and don't forget you can get that PDF as well. If you're a Fantasy Gold subscriber, you get access to the PDF as part of the package. So extra incentive there to get in on this. The paywall is coming, folks, so you're going to want to make sure that you get access to Fantasy Gold this year. Pat, any final thoughts before we close this thing out?
Nothing. Well, with all the defenses going off the board, I mean, if you, like you said before, if you don't have to draft one, don't. If you want to draft one with the last pick very late, Cleveland is a good option. They start with the Jets, the Titans, and the Raiders. So there's always a defense for you to grab late.
Yeah, and I think Miami's another one I'd be targeting there too. They might go off the board a little bit before Cleveland, but yeah, good words to live by. Target those streamers, and you'll be much better off if you do. All right, so I guess that's going to do it. This was a little bit more of a tame mock draft from us, but you get some insight. Actually allowed the 3 of us to flesh our thoughts out a little bit more. Hope you guys found it beneficial. Thank you for listening to the show. Remember, you can listen to the show in numerous places. Subscribe on iTunes, listen to us on Stitcher, listen to us on Blog Talk Radio. You can watch us on YouTube and the Fantasy Sports Network. You can follow Mike at Mike Clay NFL. You can follow Pat Thorman at Pat Thorman. You can follow me. Is it at Pat Thorman? It's not at Pat Thorman NFL, right?
There's an underscore in there.
Oh, you're an underscore. At Pat
yeah.
Thorman, at Pat _Thorman. Don't follow that at Pat Thorman. He doesn't tweet about fantasy football if he exists.
He's a little off color.
Follow me if you really want to at Jeff Ratcliffe. Follow the show at PFF_fantasy and at PFF Radio. We'll be back next week, hitting July, the doldrums of July, but there's always stuff to talk about. So thanks for listening, folks. For Pro Football Focus, he's Mike, he's Pat, I'm Jeff. That's a wrap.